Let us go live. Oh, happy Wednesday, people. Happy hump day. Happy Wednesday. This is the Damien Jones podcast. I'm your host, Damien Jones. Happy that you can be with us today. Hey, we've got a really interesting show for you today. A really good show for you today. And I want to make sure that we're bringing as many folks as we can into the room. I don't care where you are. I don't care who you are. I don't care what state. I don't care your background. I don't care your interests. Bring everybody into this room because I think we need to have a conversation with our Jewish brothers and sisters about the mutual struggle, about the issues that we face each and every day, about the perceived rift, and things of that nature within our community. So come on in this room, Damien Jones podcast. Let's take a moment right now and share. Let's make sure we share this broadcast. I'm sharing right now. Sharing is caring. If this is your first time watching, your first time listening, give us a thumbs up right now. Or if you're a regular viewer, thank you so much. Uh, give me the heart button right now. Let us know in the comments that you are here with us right now. I want to see your comments. I want to see your questions today. Because we need to talk about what is that nexus? What is that connection between the Jewish community and the civil rights movement and the African American community? And we'll be joined by a very brilliant, very compassionate, a very well-known rabbi, um, Rabbi Hayon. Make sure I don't pronounce it wrong. Right here from Congregation Emmanuel in Houston, who decided to sit down with us and kind of walk us through these things. So come on in the room and share right now. Let me find it again and share, do this watch party as well. But there we go. I've shared everything. Come on in the room, people. Listen, I hope that you are safe. Daryl Terrell, thank you for being here with us, brother, all the way from Moreno Valley, California. Thank you, brother. But come on in this room, folks. Listen, for those in Texas, Houston area, Port Arthur, Galveston, all those places, hope you are safe. Hurricane Laura is on the way. Make sure you are evacuating. Make sure you are taking care of your family as well. Let's be as safe and as smart as possible as we talk about these things. So we're sending prayers and good thoughts your way as folks come on in the room. Make sure you're evacuating people. This is nothing to play with. We got a pandemic on our hands. We got an eviction crisis on our hands. And we also don't need a hurricane tropical storm crises on our hands. I also want to lift up some prayers for for teachers and parents who across the board, teachers and parents, but particularly teachers and parents who are dealing with kindergartners. How do you introduce your children to kindergarten through Zoom? How do you introduce them to a teacher or a classmate they've never met before through Zoom? So I am praying for your sanity. I am praying for your home, your children, everything that you can make it through that situation. And on a serious note, let us send up prayers for the family of Jacob Blake, all the way in Wisconsin, who was shot 7 times in the back by a police officer in Kenosha, Wisconsin. From the video that we've seen, another unjustified shooting. But I'll talk about that on the back end of today's conversation as well. But we're going to send up prayers as well. But come on in this room. What is the connection between the Jewish community and the civil rights movement? We gotta wrestle and tackle some questions today. Uh, what does it mean to be anti-Semitic? What does it mean? I mean, we hear that term thrown around, and I know many of you probably don't know exactly what it means. So we're going to understand that today and get a better, because we are an informed and educated viewership. Why does it seem that sometimes Jews are so offended by everything, right? Let's tackle that question with our dear brother today. What did Nick Cannon say that was so offensive? We'll wrestle with that question today with our dear brother. And so let me bring our friend into the room, our good friend, Rabbi Oren Hayon from Congregation Emmanuel right here in Houston. Rabbi, welcome to the Damien Jones podcast. How are you, sir?
Thanks, Damien. Good to be with you. I'm doing all right. Thank you. Just like you said, taking it a day at a time, trying to deal with the weather, the pandemic, and I hope I'm included in your prayers for parents that are stuck home with their kids trying to figure out homeschooling and work from home. It is a challenge, but we're doing the best we can.
Absolutely. I mean, so that was my first question to you. How are you and the family and your congregation kind of maneuvering, weaving through, and tackling this COVID-19 pandemic?
I mean, it's a test. It's testing every one of our resources, kind of inwardly and outwardly. Not something that we're used to having to grapple with, but fortunately, thank God, my family and I have all been safe and healthy. Our congregation, like every community in town across the country, has been touched by the pandemic. We've certainly had folks that have lost loved ones and are struggling with loss of income, loss of jobs, loss of health, and trying to figure out how to keep our spiritual footing when we can't be near each other. I mean, I don't know if you're part of a spiritual community, but it's very difficult to do the work of worship and community and study when everybody's stuck in their own living room. You can't give anybody a hug, take a hand. But we're doing the best we can and trying to take the long view, because this thing is not going to be done next month. It's going to be a long road, and I think we're going to need to take good care of each other and use all the resources at our disposal to get through it.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about who you are, just briefly.
Sure.
And I know you can give us a long version, but just tell us who you are and the work that you do and how you came to Houston.
So I'll give you the short version. So I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Did not know that this was going to be the path I would take. There are some members of the clergy who knew from the time they were kids that that's what they wanted to do with their lives. I was not one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up in Ohio. Actually, my first trip to Houston came when I came to town as an undergrad. So I was here as a college student, stuck around for a little while, really liked it, and then spent some time on the West Coast before I decided to rabbinate. I studied for a year in Jerusalem in the seminary. I was ordained in 2004. My first post was in Dallas. So I served in Dallas for a while, served in Seattle for another few years, and have been back here in Houston since 2015, serving as the senior rabbi of Congregation Emmanuel, and I'm overjoyed at the opportunity and feel very fulfilled by the work that I get to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Folks, come on in the room. Make sure you're liking this broadcast. Make sure you are sharing this broadcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe right now to make sure you get our broadcast. If you're watching on Facebook, thank you. Make sure you are following the Damien Jones podcast to stay up to date with what kind of information that we are bringing you. And so I reached out to you, Rabbi, a few weeks ago because I saw the kind of national uproar about the Nick Cannon interview, and wanted to get a better understanding about just that type of misunderstanding. Nick was, I guess, released from his contract back home and things of that nature, was getting some backlash on social media and so forth and so on. So I wanted to talk about that, one. Two, there's always a conversation around the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in the Jewish community, and so I wanted to get an understanding about that as well. But first, I want to start with, there's a closer nexus of the civil rights movement and the Jewish community and the connection there that I don't think a lot of people understand per se. And I was reading a piece that kind of talked about how those struggles kind of combined and how they're similar, but also how they are different. And so when we talk about the civil rights movement, we think about the letter to the Birmingham jail with Martin King, and how he called on clergy to come and to be a part of that movement. And a large part of that clergy were rabbis as well. When we talk about one of the towering figures in your community, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and the towering work that he has done across the board to inspire so many in the import, no matter your race, color, creed, and so forth and so on. We see early vestiges of the Jewish community in the NAACP, so forth and so on, right? We also see freedom riders connected and supported by the Jewish community. So kind of talk to us, Rabbi, and given your community's history of oppression in this world, kind of talk to us about why the Jewish community was drawn to the civil rights movement in the 50s, 60s, and so on.
Mm-hmm. So it's a big question you're asking that sort of encompasses a lot of different factors. Yeah, you're right. The Jewish community in North America has always been very much involved in civil rights work and racial reconciliation from as far back as the first half of the 20th century. Whether it's Jews working in organized labor, especially trying to look out for African Americans and preserve their rights in the workplace. As you mentioned, NAACP, both as funders of that work and also as sort of organizational leaders of those bodies, and certainly clergy and lay people alike putting their in some cases putting their lives on the line, in some cases losing their lives to work for the struggle. To your question about why that is, I mean, I think there's probably a couple factors at play. One is that I'd like to believe that there's just a moral imperative that's at the heart of the Jewish spiritual experience. That if you don't have to be a great spiritual thinker to read the Bible and see that the story of the Hebrew Scriptures is about a God who strives for equality and peace and abhors slavery and oppression. Certainly abhors the mistreatment of folks that are marginalized and vulnerable. I'd like to think that spoke to some of the Jewish figures that have been involved in civil rights work. And then I think there's also a kind of an empathic impulse in the Jewish community, recognizing that we do have this very, very long history of oppression. Less in the United States than the African American community has had, frankly. But certainly we have this historical memory of what it's like to be on the outside, not to have access to to industry, education, employment, housing, finance, you name it. And so I'd like to think that sort of helped inspire also some of that urge within the Jewish community to get involved in civil rights work.
Yeah.
To the example of Rabbi Heschel, I think in his case, he's a really neat embodiment of both of those factors. On the one hand, he sort of comes at this work with this very strong, very compelling and inspiring spiritual teaching about the moral imperative of the prophets. If you're interested in reading his work, I find that his writing is lyrical and beautiful and inspiring.
Great work.
He also has this very heartbreaking personal history of having barely escaped Nazi Europe, having barely made it out of Poland weeks before the Nazis invaded, and having lost basically his whole family in the Holocaust. And so he has a very, not just sort of theoretical understanding of what it means to be oppressed and imperiled, but a very personal, heartbreaking story.
Yeah. Now, kind of talk to us about, here we are in 2020, and we have a very, very, very compelling presidential election on our hands, and that also local elections that are also energized as well. And no matter where you are, when we talk about the fight and the struggle for Black folks, whether we're talking about better healthcare, whether we're talking about better housing, whether we're talking about transportation issues and mobility, whether we're talking about education issues, criminal justice, so forth and so on. Two of the leading groups for a long time in that struggle have been the National Urban League and also the NAACP, right? But when we do our history, we find that the early stages of the Urban League, early stages of the NAACP, were strengthened by the work of and the support of very passionate, very visionary Jewish funders and folks who roll their sleeves up to be on the ground. Kind of talk about that impact, if you will.
Well, I can't speak much about the impact of the Jewish community on the Black community. That's for someone else's sort of academic expertise. But I can say that the work of sort of liberation and civil liberties on the Jewish community has been, I think, the effect has been to really fortify our identity as civically engaged and ethically inspired spiritual people. And that's very much a part of the way we understand our role as Americans. Obviously this may be a different story for Jews in other parts of the world, but as Americans, that's part of the story that we tell ourselves. Certainly part of the story we tell ourselves when we gather around our tables at Passover and tell the story about our liberation and Exodus. It's very, very common for Jewish Americans to see that as intertwined with the struggle for liberation and equality in our country.
Yeah, absolutely. Damien Jones podcast talking to Rabbi Hayon from Congregation Emanu right here in Houston about the nexus between the Jewish community and the civil rights movement and how we move forward and strengthen our communities and find those commonalities. I was reading a piece that said that the struggle for civil rights with the Jewish community and the African American community are similar, but at the same time, they're different, right? Can you unpack that and tell us, one, how they are similar in your view?
Sure. So, in both cases, you've got the story of a numerical minority in a either majority Christian, majority white community. You have got stories about exclusion and oppression, less in the United States, but more in global Jewish history. You're also talking about histories of violence. You're talking about expulsions, talking about the majority culture, making it clear that those minority communities are not welcome.
Yeah.
You're talking about legislative strategies employed to keep Blacks out of certain neighborhoods, Jews out of certain professions. So sort of using the levers of political and legislative power to sort of enshrine those old patterns of rights and privileges to exclude Jews or Blacks. So there are some things that are in common. I think feeling ourselves as marginalized. Because certainly numerically we are in the United States. That's been a big part of Jewish self-identity. We're still a very small, what are we, 2% of the American population, so very, very small micro minority. And that, feeling like a small marginalized minority means that we resonate in a lot of cases. Again, these are broad strokes, but means that we resonate in a lot of cases with the Black narrative in America. Now, I hope your next question is going to be, how are they different?
Yeah.
So, they're different in a lot of very important ways that I want to make sure that Jews don't overlook. I think it's really easy for Jews to say to African Americans, hey, we're the same. We're brothers in oppression, and we both have had the same experience. You've been pushed around. We've been pushed around. There's prejudice and racism in your. So that's a real temptation to sort of find that sense of fraternity and connection, but it is overly it's an overgeneralization, and I think it sort of overlooks and pushes aside a lot of the ways that Blacks in America has suffered and been oppressed in ways that Jews have escaped in large measure. That at least in our country, there's not a legacy of Jewish lynchings. There's not a legacy of police violence being employed against Jews. There's not a legacy of economic suppression, some redlining in housing, but certainly less against the Jews than against the Blacks in America. By and large, life in America has been the most open, most welcoming, most prosperous experience that Jews have had in our history. Living in Europe was way harder for Jews during the Middle Ages than it has been in America.
And as you kind of walk through those differences, and thank you for kind of just making it plain and explaining those things. Do you think, and you just mentioned, hey, we know the horrific things that happen in Europe to Jews, but you say in America, your experience has been much better, not perfect, but much better. Um, when you compare it to the experience of African Americans. Now, do you think that is because of the color of your skin, the hue of your skin? What do you think that your experience has been better here than in the African American community?
So that is a great question. Part of it is, and again, let me bracket this by saying that a lot of what I'm talking about is the experience of white Jews. There are certainly Jews of color as well who find themselves kind of in a really painful intersection of suffering both from racism and from anti-Semitism. So I don't want to discount or overlook the experience of Jews of color. But yeah, so I think there's a strong case to be made for the fact that white Jews can pass in a lot of cases, specifically non-Orthodox white Jews who don't outwardly look much different. You know, they're not going to wear different clothes or whatever it is to identify themselves specifically as part of that minority group. That may be part of it. I think that in some cases, at least in more recent Jewish history, Jewish Americans are protected by the benefits of evangelical Christianity. There's all this kind of, I want to say this diplomatically, but there are certain strains of American evangelicalism that sort of idolizes or fetishizes, is maybe a less nice way of saying it, the Jewish experience. And so we have had the benefit of some of those patterns at play in our politics and in our legislative life.
Yeah. So here's the question I've been waiting to ask you for 2 weeks here, because listen, let me just say this to you. This conversation is just educational for me. So you know, as I go back and I'll roll back the tape, you're going to talk more than me today, although this is my show, because this is extremely educational conversation for me, and I hope that this is educating our viewers as well. Folks, make sure you're liking this broadcast, sharing this broadcast. What to be anti-Semitic, you know, and I don't think people fully understand that term and why folks are offended, and folks have to walk on pins and needles and on eggshells when approaching certain historical topics and certain socioeconomic conversations, so forth and so on. But what does it mean to be an anti-Semite? What does it mean to be anti-Semitic?
Great question. So just like in the case of racism, racism is essentially the combination of prejudice plus power. I think that maybe that's a safe, convenient definition of the term. I think it's a very similar thing at play when it comes to anti-Semitism. It's the combination of prejudice plus some sort of leverage or power. And in the case of the Jewish community, and one of the reasons that it feels in a lot of cases so fraught, and it feels like it may feel like for folks outside the Jewish community that they're walking through a minefield, is that the historical prejudices against Jews, there are so many of them. There are there are prejudices that are kind of quasi-racial. People make fun of the way Jews look. There are also religious prejudices against Jews. Jews are bound for hell because they haven't accepted Jesus, or Jews cling to a certain biblical model of God that we Christians don't believe in. There's economic anti-Semitism. There's all of this whole new thing about the kind of worldwide Jewish conspiracy that is seeing new life, especially these days on the internet. So there's all of these kind of historical prejudices that are at play, and it's really easy to trip over them. I will say inadvertently, if you haven't done your reading and you don't necessarily know what prejudices have been levied against Jews in the past, and the cases in which it becomes dangerous and hurtful and most upsetting is when those things are employed by people that have, if we're going to talk about Nick Cannon, if we're going to talk about Deshaun Jackson, if we're going to talk about Ice Cube, when they're tripped over accidentally or intentionally by folks that have significant power and significant reach, that's really damaging, really hurtful.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: as you talk about some of those tropes, you talk about some of those stereotypes. Where do those stereotypes derive? Where do they come from? I know, and then they are entered into the popular culture, and I know folks just kind of pick them up haphazardly, not knowing the history of them and the pain to them, but kind of where do they come from?
You know, some of them are super old. Some of them are propagated by the medieval church out of an intent to sort of keep the Jews isolated and stigmatized. So we, create these some of them myths about Jewish behavior and Jewish rapaciousness and Jewish vulgarity or viciousness that are then sort of reinforced by law. In medieval Europe, Jews can't go to university, or Jews can't serve as doctors. Jews can only serve as moneylenders. So that's automatically going to engender a lot of hate and resentment against the Jews, and it's going to create this whole other set of prejudices and biases about Jews and money.
So stay there. So one of my favorite rapper of all time is Jay-Z. And so in one of Jay-Z's songs, I think he talked about somewhere, I don't remember the exact lyric, but he talked about Jewish wealth.
Yeah, right? You're talking about the story of OJ?
Yeah. Okay, Rabbi, man, you're on it. So kind of talk about, so you know what I'm talking about. Kind of talk about, as you just mentioned, kind of that economic kind of trope. Kind of talk about why that line was offensive, because, excuse me, we always hear that Jews have all the money, Jews buy up all the real estate, all the art, so forth and so on. Jews control New York, so forth and so on. Can I talk about why a line like that is problematic and offensive to you?
I mean, where to start? It's obviously untrue. I don't need to start. I suppose I need to start with that, but it's offensive because then when let's just take that lyric for example, and that comment about Jewish ownership or Jewish wealth or Jewish influence, it's damaging and dangerous, because when people feel very real and very real and unavoidable economic anxiety, you're losing a job, you can't afford your house, you're getting evicted, then what was economic anxiety and resentment can pivot very quickly to becoming anti-Semitic resentment. When it wasn't the Jew, there's nothing intrinsically Jewish about the fact that we're living in a place where income and wealth is unequal, and some folks have access to capital and some folks don't. That's not a Jewish invention, but all of a sudden it's become an anti-Semitic construction because of the very real economic factors that folks are feeling. Yeah, I mean, when that Jay-Z song came out, I mean, I'm a big fan too, and it was like, it's heartbreaking. Really heartbreaking.
Yeah. See, and go ahead. Yeah,
no, I'm just kidding. And it's tough because, like, I want, I would like the non-Jewish world to know, like, what that feels like, to be sort of targeted and singled out in ways that, I mean, if Jews are supposed to own everything, I have not gotten the memo because I don't know anything. I'm waiting for my check, but. But I also, like, I want to be sort of sensitive and thoughtful of the fact that, like, I don't think it should be my job to police and censor Jay-Z. Like, I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, well, I'm hurt by the fact that these artists that I really like. I mean, like, I really like Ice Cube. I really like Public Enemy. All these artists, and then when they say stuff like that, it's it feels hurtful, and not that my hurt should be the reason that these guys stop saying this stuff, but I wish that there was a sort of self-regulating mechanism inside the community that was like, hey, you can't, that stuff is out of bounds.
Yeah. Well, see, and I hear you. And let me just first say, thank you for kind of sharing this pain and that you're having. And so I can see it's a real pain. It's a real disappointment. But that's why I wanted to have this conversation. Because I'll tell you, and I don't speak for all in the Black community, but I think it's a lot of misinformation and just not understanding, because we aren't having these type of conversations. You know, and that's why I appreciate the authenticity in what you're sharing here. And so now when I hear the story of OJ, I can hear this real example that you've shared with me as we matriculate through that type of music. And but also, like, and I like the point you just made in terms of, it's not my responsibility to police Jay-Z's lyrics and to fix these errors and correct these wrongs, because often in the Black community, we are sick and tired of saying, I mean, we often say, like, hey, white folks fixed racism. We didn't create it, right? And so why is it the tiresome kind of responsibility of us to fix what we didn't create, and to fight and to try to eradicate these racist tropes, so forth and so on. And it's draining, correct?
Yes, 100%. And, you know, now that means that we have to, you know, as a representative of the Jewish community, I'll say it means that we have an extra obligation when there are people inside our own ranks that are saying stuff that is racist, sexist, what have you, classist. We need to call it out swiftly and decisively, and make it clear that, like, there's some stuff that is going to be a deal breaker, no matter how influential or inspiring or wonderful a leader you might be. You know, we're not going to be inviting Harvey Weinstein to speak at our synagogue. Right. We're not going to be inviting Woody Allen to speak about ethics at our congregation, because these are guys that are Jewish. But the last thing I want is for someone who represents those predatory behaviors and those attitudes toward women to be embraced and held up as a symbol of who we are.
Sure. Absolutely. Damien Jones podcast having a unbelievable and a very educational, let me tell you, very educational conversation with our friend Rabbi Hayon from Congregation Emanu right here in the city of Houston. Just kind of breaking down and educating folks on these racist tropes as it relates to the Jewish community, the racism and tropes connected to the African American community, the mutual pain and disappointment that we face in America, and just finding a solid and common ground on how we attack these issues. Now let me ask you this: the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is, and I told you on the phone, you know, I look up to him and I have great respect for him. And in our community, when we have had our leaders being bought and sold by government intervention, or either shot down like a dog for speaking truth to power, you know, we have the Honorable Minister Farrakhan, who has stood tall for our community. We know the Nation of Islam was created for the empowerment and betterment of Black folks, to give us confidence, to give us economic power, all those different things. And we know it has changed lives. It has got folks out of a life of crime. It has cleaned folks up from drugs and so forth, and the poverty and the urban blight that they face. We've seen a towering figure like Malcolm X and what that has done. That inspires many people, right? And to many, he's the most fearless leader that we have in America, and I'm unabashed about saying that. But on the other hand, right, we also know that he has a very challenging relationship with the Jewish community, right? And you know, to the point where, I mean, he's being censored across the board. I think his latest comments and his latest speeches was not taken very well by those in the Jewish community and other communities as well. And so here again, another educational piece here. Why is it that the Jewish community sees Minister Farrakhan is such a challenging figure? Just be frank with us as best as you can.
It's a tough one. This is one that it's really hard. And I'll tell you, you know, again, since you appreciated sort of the emotional candor and honesty, it's really hard for me to understand. And I recognize that I say that as someone who's not part of the Black community. It's really hard for me and a lot of American Jews to understand that when you've got some, as I said, a minute ago about Weinstein and whoever else, like you've got somebody who has done good things in his life with his career into the community, and yet continually, aggressively, unapologetically, repeatedly says things that are the worst kind of anti-Semitism. There are only two ways that I can understand that. One is that you don't think that stuff is anti-Semitic, which is really troubling, or that you don't think it's a deal breaker, which might be even more troubling, right? Now, again, as I said 5 minutes ago, it's not my job to be the gatekeeper of the Black community. It's not appropriate. It wouldn't be successful even if I tried. But it's very difficult for me and for other North American Jews to understand, like, how can that not be a deal breaker? Especially, and it's not like, I don't like the guy's clothes, I don't like his taste in music, he follows, he's a Yankees fan, I'm a Red Sox fan. This is a part of his rhetoric and his message that is intimately connected with his role as a community leader. And it is inconceivable, it's impossible for me to understand, for someone who has built a career and a role and a brand about the empowerment of one minority, to build that on a foundation that requires tearing down a different one. It's very, very difficult for me to understand.
Yeah. And when you and I talked about it on the phone and you shared that with me, again, educational piece, because I can only see it from the lens of within the community in which I'm a part of, and that's why we have to have these conversations to understand and see life through a different lens, to try to put ourselves in your shoes to understand, because and I know you don't want to repeat some of the things that has been said, but we can read it, and you shared it with me. I think that would be very hurtful. If someone would say that about our particular community, or it'd be very hurtful, especially in today's time where things are so.
Yeah, it would, and it should disqualify you from leadership. Again, if there's a Jewish leader who said the kinds of stuff about Blacks that Minister Farrakhan said about Jews, I would hope that guy would not only be out of a job, but would be ashamed to show his face in Jewish communal spaces.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Damien Jones podcast, talking with our good friend Rabbi Hayon about talking through healing. How do we find nexus between the African American community, the Jewish community, and some of the troubling times that we have, how we've worked together, so forth and so on. Tell me about the Nick Cannon interview. What are some of the lessons? What are some of the lessons that we can learn from those controversial comments from the Nick Cannon interview, in your view?
So I will give Nick a lot of credit. I watched the interview. It made me cringe. My initial reaction was sort of similar to what you were saying. Like, this guy obviously is unaware of or insensitive to the fact that, like, what he's stepping on, what he's saying is kind of opening up these hurts that are centuries old. He can't have known that what was going on. And I will give him a lot of credit, because when he was called out on it, he responded with grace and humility and remorse. And he has gone out of his way to enter into conversation with the Jewish community in ways that have been pretty awkward and uncomfortable, must have been for him. And I came away from this whole kind of thing with a lot more respect for him, that he's been willing to learn and ask questions and sort of come at it with a really healthy sense of self and good humor, and has not only said that he's sorry, but taken real steps to make amends and build bridges. And everybody makes mistakes. I hope that in all of our communities, when someone says something dumb or offensive or hurtful, there will be a door open for them to atone and apologize and be welcomed back in with open arms. I give them a lot of credit.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a question. Hope you'll take this question with us. Our good friend Lynette Monroe. Thank you for this question, Lynette. Thanks for watching. Since the civil rights movement, and we kind of laid those things out early on, what are some of the ways that the Jewish community continues to show solidarity with our Black brothers and sisters?
So there's still a lot of Jewish involvement in communal organizations that are working for civil rights and racial equity and justice. I think that the Jewish community has done a lot of the right first steps, especially in the recent days. We have in the Jewish community, like in a lot of other communities, especially after the murder of George Floyd, I saw a lot of real serious soul searching, real serious desire to learn what's going on and find out how we can sort of help dismantling these structures that have been deadly for African Americans for so long. I think that, again, this is a little bit of inside baseball, but I think within the Jewish community there's a little bit of tension because of what I described a minute ago, a desire to sort of let the Black community lead and let us stand in alliance and support. Sure. There are some really good, I shared some of the resources with you, and I'm happy to share some of the links later as well. There are some really good organizations, North American organizations, that are involved in racial reconciliation and anti-racist work. I know that when it comes to our particular denomination, which is the largest Jewish denomination in North America, we have done all of the right symbolic stuff, passed the resolutions and devoted educational and budgetary resources to learning more about it. In our synagogue community, we've spent time from the pulpit in the classroom talking about racial justice and what we can do. Frankly, there is a lot of the work that we've done, the justice work that we've done up until this point, and mostly about economic justice, helping folks that are food insecure, helping folks that are homeless, trying to do what we can to create affordable housing. The Jewish role in criminal justice reform is fairly new. And some promising stuff happening, but the conversation, the wider conversation at least, has broadened in sort of new ways over the last months and years. So I'm proud to see a lot of when I look at the lists of boards of directors or donors or whatever, I'm really happy to see that there are a lot of Jews that are getting involved. I think. Listen, and with all humility and modesty, we have a long way to go. Yeah. It's really important to me that the Jewish community see that the fight for criminal justice reform, for anti-racism, is not somebody else's struggle that we want to be helpful of, but it's our struggle, and we want to sort of put ourselves and our bodies and our resources on the line to help make it happen.
Yeah. And I like that you say in terms of positions of power, in terms of what does board leadership look like, in terms of some of these corporations, nonprofits, so forth and so on. The intentional act of diversifying those boards and using your power, using your platform, using your voices to help open up those doors for Black folks, brown folks, folks of color, those who are disenfranchised and oppressed, and so forth and so on. Right. So I really, really appreciate that. What are some ways, we've kind of walked in today's conversation, we've walked through that early history civil rights movement. We've come through some of these challenging figures and situations and conversations. What are some ways moving forward that we can continue to work together and intentionally work together on our mutual just family issues? At the end of the day, we are Americans. We have to decide who's going to lead the free world in a few months. No matter if you're in Houston, no matter New York, San Francisco, Florida, wherever you are, we're all right now facing a global pandemic. We all are figuring out how to get our kids to stay still and on Zoom for, as we figure out virtual learning, right? We're all trying to figure out how to close this wealth inequality gap as well. We're finding ways to make sure that our seniors are safe, but also avoiding this health crisis and so forth. We've got millions of folks who are facing eviction and being on the street as well. And then, by golly, here in this Gulf region, we're facing Hurricane Laura right now. I got folks blowing my phone up right now, checking on me and my family. So how do we continue to work together in this common thread of unity to make our community better?
Well, I think we're taking a good step now. I think conversation is always the first step. I think if you're not in conversation with folks that are different from you, no matter where you are on the political ethnic spectrum, you're really limiting what you can do. So I think it's really time to start talking to folks that that pray differently and eat differently and live in different places than we do. I mean, look, we have seen in the kind of political movements over the last few years, whether it's the Me Too movement and sort of this new wave of women's empowerment and advocacy, whether it's racism, racial justice, the power that can be unleashed when people join together, it's unbelievable. It's transformative and it's inspiring. And I think if whether it's American Jews and American Blacks, whether it's different racial minorities or religious minorities, when we join together and, like I said before, recognize that your struggle is mine and mine is yours, there is I can't think of anything that we couldn't accomplish at the ballot box, in the corporate boardroom, in the halls of Congress. We have immense power, and when you are able to join with other communities, you know, each one of those linkages is a force multiplier that allows you to accomplish so much more.
Right. So I popped the link to your congregation in our chat. So folks, if you want to connect with Rabbi Hayon, you know, feel free to reach out. He'll respond and he will get with you. And so I'm so grateful that you sat down with us today. Any final thoughts you want to share with our viewers today?
No, you know, I'm really grateful for the time. I'm happy you reached out, and I hope your viewers and your listeners will do the same. Would love to build whatever bridges that we can. We are not doing enough. None of us, I think very few of us is doing enough. And these are unprecedented times. I feel like that's a word we use all the time too often. But this is a world that our parents didn't see coming. And so we have to use the resources, the relationships at our disposal to, you know, I think make real systemic change in a world that racial minorities have been not just left out of, but actively pushed down and pushed out of for generations. You know, the time is right. The appetite is there. There's the political will and momentum. I'm really eager for me and my community to be part of the change that we need to make to help make this country fulfill the promise that it's always understood about itself from the time it was founded.
Absolutely. Rabbi, thank you so much. This has been very educational for me. And I'll keep reading some of those links and things, educational pieces that you sent me. You know, I wasn't able to watch all the videos, but hey, he sent me a ton of crap. I said, hey, send me some things. I want to be educated. Seriously, because this is about learning. You know, one of my favorite quotes is if a man thinks the same way at 50 that he thought at 20, then he's wasted 30 years of his life.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that we're having conversations that enlighten us, that educate us, that challenge our thinking, that challenge our presuppositions about life, and just making sure that we are positioning ourselves and inspiring folks and helping communities and leaving the world better today than how it was when we founded. And so, Rabbi, I'm so grateful to you. I'm so thankful. I hope that we could have you back on the broadcast at a later time to talk about other things as well. So we appreciate you. Thank you. And then, you know, I'll send you a message later on. Okay.
Terrific. Perfect.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you much. Great to chat with you.
So Rabbi Oren Hayon from the Congregation of Emmanuel right here in the city of Houston. We're so grateful that he joined us on today. I want to talk about really quickly before I go. I know we need to be mindful of this hurricane that's coming as well. So I'm going to hop off in a second, but I want to talk about Jacob Blake for just a second here, folks. I want to just put this on the screen. I want to talk about so yeah, my thoughts on Jacob Blake, thoughts on that shooting, right? And thank you again, Rabbi. That was a I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. I hope you saw the pain in some of his comments, and he was just real authentic and genuine with us. So really appreciate that. Jacob Blake, folks. Jacob Blake shot 7 times in the back. You've seen the video. Again, I don't share those videos. I don't want to share those videos. I saw it one time. I only watched it one time. It's painful. It's sickening. It is traumatizing for me. It's traumatizing for Black men, Black folks, people. If you're human, it's traumatizing for you to see that. And as a guy who has had many interactions with the police, again, I've been held up before. I've been held up at gunpoint with a red dot on my forehead when I was 20 years old by the police, not knowing if I would breathe another breath. I've had some very unfortunate situations. And so that is the experience of a Black man. And so here we have now Jacob Blake shot 7 times in the back in front of his children. In front of his children. I think 3 children in the back of the car. And he was shot 7 times in the back. And thank God that he survived. At this point, he survived and paralyzed from the waist down. We don't know if that's permanent or not. But here are my thoughts. Number one, he should not have been shot. Now we talk extensively. I talk all the time on this show about the need for better policing, the need for better training, the need for better hiring, the need for psychological evaluations, the need for checking for PSD, the need to go deeper in what we call policing in this country, right? The need to look at implicit biases and things of that nature. And so as I review the short clip, the video that we have, it's clear to me that he should not have been shot. You see him walking into his car to grab, to whatever. I don't know. It seems to me maybe he was going to check on his children, I would think. But he should not have been shot. That was a perfect situation for de-escalation, right? Why didn't they tase him? He didn't have a gun. Why didn't they just tase the fella? Why didn't they use some type of physical force to just take him down of some sort? But instantly guns are drawn on this fella as though he has an AR-15 on his side aiming at police officers. That was not the case. So why were guns drawn, several guns drawn on this fella within that particular moment, right? The other video we saw, I saw another earlier video that he was tussling with the police a little bit there, broke away, and then he was walking to his car. So he should not have been shot, number one. But number two, I want to be critical of our dear brother. I love Brother Blake, but I have to be critical in this moment as well. Black men, Black women, Black anybody, Black whatever, children, whomever, brown folks, folks of color, anybody. If you are stopped by a police officer, for whatever reason, you may be right. They may be stopping you illegally. I've been stopped illegally before. I've been frustrated with the police. I didn't want to comply with the things that they asked me to do. I didn't want to get out of the car. I didn't want to give them my license. I was going about my business. I wanted to curse them out, but I did not. And so with the information that I have, Brother Blake should have complied. He should have just complied, right? And this is not me casting aspersion on him, because I'm sure he felt as though they're messing with me for no reason. I'm tired of this. I'm frustrated. I've seen these other situations. I'm a man. I didn't do anything wrong. I get it. Trust me. I've gone through it tons of times, right? But it's best to comply and live to see another day and hire a lawyer and allow the legal process to play itself out. It's better to comply and to live to tell your story. And if they were wrong, then you sue the pants off the law enforcement agency and you get a good chunk of money, or whatever the case may be. But we want to see you live, right? And so some of these situations can be avoided if we just comply. And I know it feels like emasculation. I know it feels like people stripping you down. I get it. Trust me, I get it. God, I get it. And I hate that I'm saying this, but we want to see our brothers and sisters live to see another day. So comply. And so I would have loved to see our brother comply in that moment. Just take the cuffs, go down. Because what we saw was, I hate to see that his children saw him shot 7 times in the back. Think about the trauma that produces, right? And which that was all the cops' fault, not his fault. But I wish he would have complied, right? And I say that to any young brother, young sister who's pulled by the police today, tomorrow, next week, just comply, right? And live to talk about your story. We still haven't heard a charge. I don't know about you. I haven't heard a charge. I haven't heard what the exact charge was. I haven't heard what it is they were looking to detain him or arrest him or accost him for in the first place. I've yet to hear a charge here. And so the situation continues to look kind of fishy, kind of not right to me. So what is the charge? I heard that he was breaking up some type of domestic fight or something like that. If he was breaking up the fight and being a peacemaker, then why are guns drawn on the peacemaker, right? And so I saw police who did not survey the scene, who did not see that there were children in the car, who did not properly investigate the situation before using force. And so that is not proper policing. That's not proper policing whatsoever. And so here's what I saw. We saw this in the case in Atlanta with Rayshard Brooks. And this happens all the time. I don't suggest people tussle with the police. I don't. I really don't. But it happens sometimes. And when police lose control of the situation, they're trained to fight and be a warrior. And oftentimes when an African American gets that physical leg up on them and manhandles them, guess what, folks? Their ego is bruised. Their ego gets bruised and they look to settle the score with the gun, with force. We saw with Rayshard Brooks. He tussled with the police, running away. The cop's ego was bruised, shot him in the back. As soon as he shot him, he says, I got him. Same situation here. Why do you shoot this man 7 times? He doesn't have a gun. He's not presenting a threat toward you, and you shoot him 7 times in the back because the cop's ego was bruised, because he tussled with them. He walked away, and the cop looked to settle the score. We've got to change policing in this country. And Joe Biden isn't going to wave the magic wand to fix it. Donald Trump isn't going to wave the magic wand to fix it. I don't care what they tell you. We've got to hold these police agencies accountable. If that's holding mayors accountable who appoint them, if that's holding state legislators accountable who create the rules within each state. But we cannot have cops selling a score, essentially a pissing match, at the scene of a possible crime by shooting Black men, Black women, Black children in the back and killing them. Thank God this dear brother Jacob Blake survived, but that's normally not the case. And so I pray for the family of Jacob Blake. I pray for the entire community of Kenosha, Wisconsin, about 100,000 folks. I pray for the psyche, for the mental health of Black folks around this country who continue to see this type of lawlessness and police violence and all-out war on the Black family. I pray for our country. I also pray for police who wake up every day and want to feed their family, and they have a tough job. And each situation is a split-second decision that they have to make. And all cops aren't bad. Let me be clear about that. There are good cops. I have good cops who are friends, and I support them. But just in any profession, you have bad apples. You have those who are not handling the job well, who need to be taken off the job, who need to be fired, who need to be retrained, who need to be locked up when criminal activity is happening. And so I thank you all for joining me today. Folks in Texas, please be safe. Let me go check the weather report right now. call my dad back. Been blowing my phone up here. But be safe, folks. Be mindful, be vigilant, register to vote. Make sure you're voting on November 3rd as well. And join me on Friday. We'll have a great conversation. Thank you, Rabbi Hayon, for talking with us about the Jewish community. But until next time, continue to live your life with intensity, integrity, and intelligence. This is